Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we're going to talk about how we can create more loving, graceful, beautiful end-of-life experiences for ourselves and our loved ones. I'm Risa Morimoto, your host, and I am an integrative nutrition health coach. You're watching Modern Aging, where we chat about innovative and holistic ways to elevate our health and well-being as we age. When you click on that little red button below that says subscribe on it with that little bell next to it, you'll be sure to be notified whenever a new episode is uploaded. You can also check out our website at thisismodernaging.com. So today my guest is Alua Arthur. She is a death doula, an attorney, she's an adjunct professor, an ordained minister, and she is the founder of Going with Grace. It's an organization that helps families plan for end of life and also tying up all the loose ends. Because as we know, tying up those loose ends can be very complicated and messy. So I've had my own share of end-of-life experiences recently. Many of you know that my mother passed last October and my dad died from COVID just this past April. So having someone there to be able to ask questions and find comfort and support is invaluable, especially in these incredibly emotional times. So I'm hoping that you will take a listen, gain some knowledge, and check it out. Alua, thank you so much for being here today. I am quite excited to talk about what we're going to talk about.
Thank you. I'm really excited to talk to you too.
No, this is awesome. I saw you at the Endwell conference last December where you talked about end of life, and it was something that I was kind of dealing with. My mother had just passed, and I just feel like it's such an important topic, even more so now with COVID. I think it's raised it to a whole other level. So maybe we can just start off with you talking to us about how you actually even got started in this industry. I don't even know if you call it an industry, in this field, and what your path was.
I think it's safe to call it an industry now, as much as we dislike the term. There are some structures being built around it. I became a death doula, I'd say, in 2013, when my brother-in-law died. Prior to that, I had been practicing law at the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, doing domestic violence work and community economic development. And it all was work that generally fed the soul, one would say, but I was out of alignment. It wasn't my highest good. The work on the outside was tremendous, but something wasn't quite right within. And I developed a very, very deep depression and took a leave of absence from work. And during that leave of absence, ended up in Cuba, where I met a woman on a bus who had uterine cancer. I know, it's absurd.
Because that's what we do.
Right? That's what you do. You go to Cuba
You go to Cuba.
when you're depressed. Well, I went to Cuba. I drank a lot of rum and danced on the street and cried at night and tried to make sense of my life, which I was having no luck doing. But I met a woman on a bus, a fellow traveler named Jessica, who had uterine cancer. We talked a lot about her illness. We talked about her death. We talked about her life. We talked about what was undone in her life. And through that conversation, I started to think about all those questions in terms of my own life and realized I had never asked these things of myself. Like what meaning had my life had so far? What meaning had my life's work had so far? And don't get me wrong, I'm not somebody who's like really big on like purpose and finding a purpose. I was just more trying to find ways to like make it through my day where I felt happy and joyful, but the law wasn't cutting it. So through that discussion, I began to see where I'd been really selling myself short and how there was so much more for me than what I was, there was so much more in me than what I was currently giving the world. And that is one of my basic values. And so started really thinking about how best to do that for myself, which happened to coincide with the idea of how we die. Thinking about my own death, thinking about how we all die, I thought we can do better. This is a conversation that should be happening overall.
Well, can you actually what is a death doula?
Sure. A death doula is somebody that does all the holistic care and support of the dying person and the circle of support, the family members and those that are around through the entire process. So when people are healthy, we help them create comprehensive end-of-life plans, looking at the end. When somebody is ill and knows what it is that they're going to be dying of, we help them have the death most ideal under the circumstances. And after somebody dies, we help family members wrap up affairs of their loved one's life if they need the support there. So we're doing all things death, no matter at what stage you're at.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm sorry. So continue. So then
Sure.
you came back.
I came back to the States and I was like, I'm a good work in death. And people were like, what are you talking about? Because it came out of left field for me as well, you know, totally
Are
came out
you
of
a
left
witch?
Yeah, right. All the time. You're going to kill people, you kill people, right? Yeah. So not long after that, like I came back and threw myself into books and I went to lectures and I was meeting hospice folks and doctors and, you know, funeral homes, just trying to learn everything I could about the work itself. But nothing was really sticking until my brother-in-law got ill. He developed Burkitt's lymphoma when he was 43 years old. And a few months later, yeah, the lymphoma wasn't going to be treated anymore. Nobody said that he was dying necessarily. They just said they were going to try this for pain and they were going to try this for this. But they weren't ever saying we're attacking the tumor or we're trying to heal the cancer. And I got to be with him and my sister and my niece for the last 2 months of his life in New York City. And that was my first time I ever doulaed somebody. It was also the single,
You were informal doula, or were you already certified at that point?
No, I was informal. I was just doing things that needed to be done, hoping that I could support them that way. I'd listen to their needs. I'd ask questions. I was looking around like what needs to be done. Basically, I was doing all the work on the outside circle and on the outside rung to like hold them up on the inside. My sister, his parents, my niece. Yeah, so I was informally douling. And when he died, I remember trying to help my sister get like the little, you know, try to, on a Post-it note, I was so short-sighted about what this would take, but on a Post-it note, try to write down the things that she had to do to wrap up, you know? Oh. And sitting on the couch, like just kind of staring off into space in the throes of acute grief, still very much a shock. And the Post-it note was getting so full, and I like, there was so much to be done. I was way overwhelmed by it. And I thought, if I'm overwhelmed, how is she ever going to manage this? Right. How is she going to manage this? I wish there was somebody we could pay who would do all this for us, who would have been there along the process, who knew about what we were doing. It was so isolating, but it didn't need to be so. Right. It didn't need to be so. Yeah.
So why is this not common practice? Why is it that, like, you know, birth doulas? I know. Sorry. It's perplexing that this is just not something that everybody does, you know?
Yeah, it's perplexing to me too, now that I'm here. But at the time, when we were in it, I wished for somebody, you know? When we were in it, I desperately was like, who can I just pick up the phone and will answer all of my questions? It wasn't the doctors, it wasn't the nurses. I think it's not that way because we still don't want to face up to the fact that we're going to die. You know, we'll joyfully prepare for a birth, but death has most people screaming for the hills. Don't get me wrong. I find that through my work, I create a lot of permission for people to begin talking about death themselves. Like, you know, on a plane, that poor person that catches me on like a flight from LA to New York and they ask me what I do and I'm like, oh, about to mess up your whole ride. But then we end up talking about grief and what they've experienced and, you know, the work itself and ideas they have about their death. Like, we want to engage with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As soon as you give someone an opening, they just go for it, and they really do. They really, really do. I mean, I love this sentence that you have on your website, and I've heard you say it, but you ask, what must I do to be at peace with myself so that I may die gracefully?
Yes. Must.
So what is the meaning behind, so that's your mission?
Yeah.
And so how did you come to that? Was it through your brother, or did it just like spark afterwards?
Yeah, well, it had sparked already on the bus in Cuba, like a little flint caught, and then it grew into a fire when I was like reading things, and with my brother-in-law, it was like a full grown. But it took a while after that, while I worked through my grief, because I find that a lot of people come to this work in direct response to a death that they witnessed that was either, you know, so beautiful, they want everybody to have that, or so horrific, they don't want anybody to go through what they did. And I think it's important to take a minute and breathe and, you know, sit with grief first before moving this. Certainly we can turn pain into purpose, but we just have to be sure that it is the purpose talking and not just the pain. So I took a minute to breathe and read and grieve. I cried a lot. I sat on the couch. I ate all the potato chips in the world. I just was like with myself, and let somebody take care of me during that time. And after I noticed that, it just refused to let go. I was like, okay, this might be something, and followed through. I did a training course here in LA through an organization called Sacred Crossings, which is wonderful. And I was done, and I hung out my shingle and waited for everybody to call me, and nobody did. Nobody did. Nobody did.
Even though 100% of people will need your services.
Money back guarantee. 100 out of 100 are going to die. Yes, but it was, it took a lot of work in public education, because if people don't know that we exist, they're not going to call. And so I made it my work to get out there and let people know that death doulas were a thing. And then I started getting some clients that way. But then also started noticing how, people that would call because somebody had died and had a lot of things undone and they weren't sure how to do it. I thought it'd be so much easier if we had this information before they died. So then started adding on comprehensive end-of-life planning. And through the end-of-life planning, noticed that there were things that were that people really needed to do. Some of them it's having their affairs in order, but others it's about their emotions and their relationships and heal things or go to Machu Picchu or whatever the thing may be. But for most, it's not as grandiose as going to look at the Mona Lisa. For others, it's about spending time with the people that they care about. What must I do to be at peace with myself? What must I do? Because I think most of us look for peace at the end of life.
Yeah. And I think they want peace for their family as well.
Absolutely.
They want to make sure everybody's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are a number of ways we can do it. Yeah.
So how would you say you differ from, let's say, an elder law attorney or a hospice nurse or, there's a number of different, I feel like, there are a number of people who do kind of segments of what you do.
Yeah, and that's kind of it. Everybody does segments, and we roll it all into one. We're a complementary service to hospice. We are an extra set of hands, eyes, and ears in the home, at the bedside. So often, after I've been working with the family for a while, when the hospice team comes in, knowing that there's already been permission to talk to me, they'll ask me, how are they doing? And I'll share with them not only how the person themselves is doing, but also how the caretakers are doing. What's the family dynamic like that day? How did they sleep? Something that they said that was bugging them. It might not be related to their medical care, but it does help to create whole person care. Often when we're in the medical system, people are looking at illness and disease and treating symptoms and so on and so forth. We're looking at all of their needs: sexual, intimacy, being heard, how they feel, the feel of things on their skin. We're looking at all of their needs holistically. I'm also not doing any practice of law, I have to say, thank God. I'm not practicing law in any capacity anymore. But when it comes to the end-of-life plans, I am helping people create advanced care directives and getting clear on who they want to make their decisions. So we're a little bit of all rolled into one, but we're also really our own freestanding, let me come and be with you through one of the hardest walks you'll ever take in your life.
That's great. That's great. I mean, do you feel like there's a rise with COVID for your services? Do you feel like more people are reaching out to you, or that people are becoming more accepting of death doulas, or that they want them?
Yeah, I think more people want them, but I also think what's really happening is a lot of people, okay, so death is in our faces a lot, right? We're hearing the numbers and what's the count and how many people are dying in Italy as opposed to America, and what about Brazil? And so death is in our faces a lot, and how people are dying are in our faces a lot. And people are kind of unsettled with the fact that other people are dying alone. And I think through that has come a desire to want to be of service for many. The Death Doula training course that I have online has gotten a tremendous, overwhelming response since COVID began. I think twofold. First, threefold. People are at home and they have maybe a little bit of extra time to throw themselves into something they've always been curious about. Next, they're seeing how people are dying and want to do something about it. And third, oh shoot, I hate it when I do that. I say three, third is gone by the time I get there. There's a solid third. It'll come later. So death it's like really in our faces, and we want to show up to support it better. And so people are showing up to support it through this course. I like to believe that ultimately it means that, if they never do it professionally or never build a business out of it, that they'll be prepared when their family members' turns come or somebody in their community, because there's a lot of different ways to do this work.
So how do you actually train to be a death doula? Like, what is that all about? What are you teaching them?
Well, what we have is a 12-part course that begins in module 1 with the role of a death doula, thinking about what the conception of the role is, where it came from, what it looks like for you, what are the different services we offer, because not all death doulas do all things. In module 2, we look at conscious dying. We look at our own relationships with death to make sure that we're doing our best not to put our fears and our judgments on other people. In module 3, we look at the art of medicine, what it actually looks like out there. There's films about the ICU. Module 4, signs of dying, being with dying itself. In module 5, natural death care. Module 6, funeral homes and the funeral industry. In module 7, we look at legacy, ritual, meaning making. Module 8, advanced care planning. Module 9, everything beyond the advanced directive. Module 10, wrapping up affairs after somebody dies. Module 11, grief and bereavement and burnout. And module 12, practice building and self-care. Oh my God, I feel like I just won a prize.
Wow, that was impressive. I did not expect you to break it down, but that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, it's also, this is a big portion of my work now, and I think all elements need to come together for somebody to be properly prepared to be at the bedside. So it's kind of drilled in there.
But not everybody is built to be a death doula, right? Not
Correct.
Everybody is built to, I feel like it has to be really an extra empathetic, compassionate person to be able to fill that role. Do you screen people, or do you advise people? People think, oh, it sounds really cool, or I don't know, or people have ill intentions. I don't know.
I haven't met any ill intentions yet, but let me tell you what, to choose to do work with people that are dying, it's not like you just sign up oh, this sounds like an interesting job. You know what I mean? If that's the case, then try being a nail tech, because that's an interesting job, right? You get to paint on people's fingernails. But being around really messy, and it's hard, it's sad, there's a lot of emotional depth. People are generally called. And I've yet to meet somebody who feels called where it wasn't real and rooted and, good intention. It takes a healthy heaping of compassion and empathy to be with people that are at the end of life. But I'd say most important is building a really healthy relationship with death yourself. Because that doesn't mean that to be a death doula, you can't have any fear of death or anything like that. But it just means looking at it, turning it over, because you're going to be sitting with people in their fear of death. You're going to be sitting with people at the end. So work on it yourself first.
How do you help people accept death or look at it in a way that's not so fearful?
Great question. I don't think it's really my role to help anybody accept death. My job is just to be with people exactly where they are. I got a call yesterday, and it's a daughter calling on behalf of her parents. Her dad has metastatic cancer, pancreatic cancer, and she said, my dad still has ideas about working on the shed after, he gets better, but he's probably not getting better. And she's like, how can you help him get there? But I can't. I can't. The best I can do is talk to him about where he is, what's happening with his body. Sometimes, I'll be frank, that in their quiet moments, they know that they're dying. They just continue to put on a brave face or I'm going to beat this for the world. And so sometimes it takes me being alone with them so they can just admit what's actually on their heart. But if somebody really isn't there isn't much I can do. I can be in the trenches with them, hold their hand, ask them what their needs are, but I can't get them out of the trench. That's not my job. My job is compassion, which says, I might not understand your experience, but I'm going to be here with you.
And do you find that along this journey towards death that people get there on their own? Do you see the transformation happen? I imagine you must.
Some people get there on their own. Yeah. At some point it's undeniable, Some people will fight it tooth and nail. but there's no winning.
Right.
Like the body always wins, but most I've seen surrender. It was a woman who was, well, initially she was, tired of the condition of her body, and so her daughter called me and I sat with her. By the time I got there, though, she had decided that she was going to live, and so I was like, hey, well, you know what I do, right? Okay, so let's talk about the activities that you can still engage in and what still makes you feel alive, and that way. And we worked together for a while. But, about 3 weeks before she died, she was back aware that her death was approaching, and then we were able to prepare for it in an honest way.
So at what stage do people generally call you?
It depends. It depends. I mean, people call me when they're healthy for end-of-life planning. And I've certainly worked with people that had a major illness. There was a woman that had breast cancer, and I worked with her when she was in the middle of treatment. It was stage 2. She was expected to make a full recovery, which she did, and then eventually showed up again and metastasized, and she died. So we'd already done the planning work when she was, ill, but not expected to die of this disease. And there was about a 4-year gap in there. So people call me when they're healthy. People sometimes call 3 months before death. There was a 94-year-old woman with dementia who developed pneumonia, and we thought the pneumonia was going to kill her, and she recovered. And so then I kept working with her for a few months, and then it was like, well, she's better, so we stopped. She lived for another year after that. And then there are people that, we expect are going to live for a while, not yet in the hospice, maybe just have a degenerative disease, and who die relatively quickly. There's no way to tell, which is like the frustrating part about death. One of the frustrating parts about death and dying.
No, it's true. For my mom, she had many close calls, and even when she was passing, we're like, maybe she'll, you know what I mean? Like, we've been here before. Maybe she'll kick back, And then ultimately we realized that it was her time. What do you provide the families and the close circle of people around the person who's dying? I mean, I imagine that emotions are extremely heightened. So much so that sometimes it's irrational, right?
Yeah.
So how can you provide support for families?
Listening. I'd say top of the list of my things that I do is I listen a lot. I validate and affirm. Often when the emotions are irrational, I can see it as an expression of grief, either anticipatory grief or just grief, straight up grief. Sometimes there's a lot of anger. Sometimes there's frustration. I listen a lot. I validate emotions a lot. And I sometimes offer resources or ways to, be with what they're experiencing. But then there's also a lot of the practical elements of the work that I do. I listen, I respond to needs as I hear them. I once was with a family where they struggled to get the mom's arm up into one of these gowns, one of the hospital gowns that closed in the back, that she just wouldn't get her arm in. And so we found gowns that opened up on the side, so she never had to lift the one arm. It's simple. There some little things, some bigger things too, like piles of mail that have been sitting in the corner for the last 15 years. Nobody's opened, and we got to attack it. Yeah.
Wow. And then you also help people once the person has passed as well, kind of tying up. When you say tie up loose ends, what do you mean by that? I mean, because that is can be a lot.
It is a lot. And we ask people to do it when they're grieving.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It makes sense. They can't figure up from down, yet they have to navigate bureaucracy and call Experian credit union 15 times and call Citibank to try to close accounts. Come on, it's so rude. It's so rude. So rude. And so because of that, I'll do it. I don't really like talking to Citibank either, but I'm not grieving. And so it's going to be a lot easier for me just to handle it than it will be for you. So I do plenty of that also. We'll help people create a list of accounts, which is useful in probate also. So we work with probate lawyers sometimes. We'll create lists of accounts. We'll help them figure out what's still open, what needs to be closed, in what order things should be closed. Because if you close one thing before you close another thing, then you've created a whole puzzle for yourself. There's so many duties involved when somebody dies, aside from just planning a funeral and what to do with the body. Then you have all of life to close up. Like, I have a bunch of stuff and socks and drawers full of junk and drawers full of pretty sentimental things. Like, somebody's gonna have to do all of that after I die.
Oh yeah, my husband and I have a competition going because I want to die first, and he's like, "Hell no, I am not cleaning up your stuff. I am dying first."
Hysterical.
But there is a little bit of truth to that too. But what would you recommend telling families, like, how do they open up this conversation, right? So say somebody wants to bring in a death doula, or, mom's not doing so great or whatever. How do you recommend families opening up that conversation?
It sounds like you're already pretty good at it, because one of the things is just the lead in, like, mom's not doing so great. And then wait to see a response and suggest that there are professionals or people that you can call in that can help figure out, what needs to be done, or make things a little smoother, or just somebody to call. I find that people are often open to the suggestion. Some people think that they've got it, which they do. But for others that just want maybe even just somebody to talk to. Sometimes I suggest that if the person who's dying and the immediate circle of support aren't quite ready for that conversation, I can support the person who is ready for that conversation, go in there, keep giving them tips and resources and things so that when they go in, they feel fully resourced. Essentially, I'm creating a doula out of the person who's going in. Earlier we were talking about not everybody is built for, and it's true, but a lot of us will do it. We'll do it. We'll do it for our parents, or our family members, our spouses. A lot of us end up doing it. So it'd be great if everybody in the world got some death doula training.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, so what do you recommend actually for families just in general, because it's true, everyone's going to die. Everyone's going to have a family member they know that's going to die. How can we better prepare for death? Because I feel like most people are very ill prepared.
They absolutely are very ill prepared. I think there's a number of things to do. I mean, at the best case scenario is that everybody take death doula training. But short of that, start having conversations about your own death. Like what you want, what you're open to, what would work best for you. Stay in a relationship with it as it changes, as you change. Create some documents, see a lawyer, get a will, get an advanced care document going. Just even talk about your desires for life support. That's another thing about the pandemic, is that all of a sudden we're hearing about ventilators, and people are like, well, what's a ventilator do? And do I want that for myself? That's a great place to start having these conversations. So circulating the information amongst family members. My mom, at least, who's been very forthcoming with her ideas and what she might want, I now have to encourage her to also tell my sisters, so that when the time comes, I'm not just like, Mom said, but they've also heard it. And it's challenging for her, certainly also for my sisters, but lucky for everybody. I'm just talking about death all the time. lucky, but regardless. So the pill goes down a little bit easier, and it still requires encouragement so that my mom will talk to them too. But easing in, and considering the setting, maybe Thanksgiving table is not the best place to have the conversation, but after dinner, when had a couple of glasses of wine and putting the dishes away, would be a better place to have a conversation. Aim for intimacy, because it's a hard one, undoubtedly, right, but necessarily. And I think it actually can be an amazing opportunity to become closer to the people that you love too. When you really I think people discover new things about them, right? Because without a doubt, everybody thinks about it. Yeah.
So it's just kind of whether or not you vocalized your thoughts about it. But for me, having gone through what I have gone through with my parents, I don't want that for my daughter, right? I want to have everything kind of tidied up and taken care of, and that she knows exactly what I want, And she's like, Mommy, don't worry. I'm going to take you to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But after I die. So it's like, I want to be there already when I'm alive. So don't just take my ashes. I said, you know. But, so as we wrap this up, how can we create a little bit less myth about the death doula and create more, to have more people embrace what you do, and so many incredible people around the world do, to create a more peaceful end of life experience for so many?
I think what would be really useful is if we start talking about death ourselves. You know, the message is starting to spread about death doulas, and somebody ancillarily in the community has heard of one or might know one. So as you begin having the conversation, it's going to start bringing up the ideas about death for yourself, and might also create an invitation for those in your life who have needs and who might be facing it sooner than you to also express what theirs are. And then through that, we can find proper support for it. You know, we talked about this at the beginning, but it seems like a taboo, but I think we often find that people want to talk about it. They just need a little bit of space to do so. And our aging parents and our aging bodies also want to talk about it.